We're watching the news every day, but there is so much in the news, so much that we don't care about. Stock market, maybe politics itself, or maybe just some charity job or something that is happening that you really don't have an interest for. But there is now a way to get news with no noise, and that is Inform. This is not an ad, nor I'm getting paid to do this episode, but I am Juan Collado Díaz, and this is Político. Hello everybody, and welcome once again to another episode of Político. I am Juan Collado Díaz, and today with me, I have the CEO and creator of Inform. Inform is a platform that is news without the noise. So if you want to receive just great news, but not all the other bullshit that comes with it, this is the platform for you. And it is an easy subscription and an easy cancellation if you do not like it. So again, as I said before, I'm not getting paid to do this episode, but I find it so awesome that there's a news source like this out there for people like me and you that I decided to bring Kira Shishkin to the podcast. So Kira, I want to ask you first, what's the big idea behind Inform? What inspired you to create Inform, and how did it come together?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on, Juan. Really, really appreciated being here. And I think a little bit about me is I'm Kira Shishkin, the CEO of Informed. And we've built Informed to sort of help folks navigate the age of information overload, which is very much the reality that we live in today. We no longer have to go to the archive, go to the library in order to retrieve information or an answer to a question. Now you have a half-baked curiosity, interest, and the internet is just going to be throwing information at you left, right, and center. And there is too much information. It's the opposite of what we had a few decades ago when we didn't have enough. Now we have too much information. And dealing with that specifically in the context of news is very responsible. Right, is important to get it right, important to not be overwhelmed, not be influenced in the process, and get what you need to know efficiently, quickly, and move on with your day. And we found that on the landscape of solutions today in the news industry, in the media industry more broadly, there aren't really solutions that serve that need well. And so we built Informed to be better and to be different, where we provide news without noise to our users on a daily basis with an easy format run through SMS. So there's no accounts, there's no privacy violating cookies. You simply are texting a number, or you get texted by a number, the things that you need to know every single day. And it's powerful because you can then leverage that to read more, or you can not read anything else and still know what is going on and still be the most informed person in the room, whether that's a room of colleagues or a room of friends or a room of family. And so Informed is essentially news without noise delivered to you every weekday via SMS.
Let me ask you, what inspired you to create this platform? Like, I know, we have as you said, busy news every day. There's so much out there, but like nobody has come with this idea to just create something like that. What inspired that idea for you?
Totally, and I think it's a combination of reasons. I'd definitely say it's probably a bit of personal and a bit of just observing the industry and seeing that opportunity arise. I think for me personally, I have grown up across conflicts and places where there's just a lot of information conflict of different sides of the story, different sides of the conflict, trying to influence the general public and each other as to what is reality. And so very early on in my life, I found that you really can't trust anything. You have to, really scrutinize everything that you encounter. And there really isn't a source that's dedicated to being unbiased and non-overwhelming. Everywhere you look online, every source has some kind of bias that you sort of can't avoid. And there is some level of overwhelm. There's a lot of information out there. There's not just one article on anything. There's 1,000 articles on every single topic. And so the personal experience growing up in conflict was definitely like a big jumpstart. I grew up between Ukraine and Israel. And it's just been, a case study in how much information conflict can exist in society, and how important it is to stay informed without necessarily being pushed to take sides by the news media that you consume, which is the default for most of the news media. So that's more from the personal angle. From the market angle and seeing the opportunity that is not being served today, it didn't take far for us to look across the news media landscape and see, well, is there a source of news that is not overwhelming and not biased? And there isn't, right? As you look across the media landscape, these companies are beholden to advertisers who are pushing them to be more engaging, more time consuming, more sort of overwhelming in many ways. They're beholden to partners and sponsors that tell them, hey, we're going to pay for this stuff, but you have to talk about us, or you have to talk about the issues that we care about, which of course undermines journalistic and reporting credibility and the mission. And the forms that still exist that have no bias and no solicitations are very long form, meaning you have to read a lot of hours. Every day you have to sieve through the content and see what is here that is an actual signal and not just the noise. And that whole experience is just extremely overwhelming for the everyday person in the United States. And we serve all of North America, United States, Canada as well. It's very difficult to, it's virtually impossible to keep up with the flow of information that's happening on a daily basis. And so we decided to create something that does better across all of those aspects of news. There's no solicitations, there's no advertisements, there are no sponsors or even investors that would undermine our journalistic integrity. And there's a focus on the reader, the user, who wants to get the information and get out. Some people crave more long-form content, and there are better places for that than us. But we provide this monitor of global and world and North American news that anybody who thinks of himself as an informed citizen, an informed global citizen, has now the tool to be informed without being influenced, and be informed without being overwhelmed.
And one thing you mentioned just right now, it's like this news are unbiased. There's no partisan behind this news. So, and if I'm correct, how are you able to figure out this like news world without finding something that is biased? Because most news sources, as you said, right now have that problem to where they're either left or right, and they're not moving away from like one of those topics. Even like world news reported in the US are so partisan that they have become aggressive towards the reader. I had the opportunity to use Inform for, I believe, over 2 weeks now, and it has been amazing. I have noticed how there's no partisan bias in there. How do you do it to keep it that way? What goes behind the scenes, to make it to where nobody is forcing left or right views on someone?
Totally. And it means a lot hearing that from you, Juan, that you've been enjoying the lack of partisanship in our service. That's very much the goal. And part of the things that we take a lot of pride in is that we have people across the political spectrum that are extreme right, extreme left, anywhere in the middle, as well also folks across different socioeconomic levels, right? We have very low income folks, we have very high income folks. And we're able to contain because we're able to serve all of them effectively, because we're not catering to a certain perspective, we're not catering to a certain bias, we're just sharing the facts. And to respond to your question more directly is, how do we do it? Well, actually, by doing less instead of doing more. Most of the news outlets and companies out there are actually doing what we call news commentary, where they provide the news, but then they also talk about it at length through many paragraphs. They bring in experts, they bring in conversationalists, they bring in witnesses, and it's just like, okay, well, you're doing a lot here. It's a lot of discussion of the news, but I want to sort of be able to consume news without being influenced by the discussion, without being forced to take a perspective in reaction to the evidence that you're suggesting there. And whenever you have an article that is going for longer than a few paragraphs, you are ultimately going to break into discussion, break into commentary. And the type of evidence that you source, the type of detail that you highlight necessitates a certain perspective, suggests a certain perspective. And so the way we're able to keep it so pure is actually by doing less instead of doing more, and limiting ourselves to what we call the reporting level insight, which, to put very simply, is what happened, where, when, and what's the relevant context that helps contextualize the impact of what's going on, without suggesting if that's a good or a bad thing, ever, without suggesting other people's perspectives, without citing them. We do sometimes bring in perspectives from researchers, from kind of commentators, but we always cite, hey, like this is a perspective of UN OCHA. This is a perspective of Pew Research. We never claim that that is sort of our agenda, and we don't really have an agenda to make you believe one thing or another. So to answer your question, it's by doing less and by limiting ourselves to the what, where, when, and the context, and doing that so in a very minimalist format where there isn't even space to introduce our bias because we're being so self-constrained to just the essentials.
And now to more of a question like relating the system, the platform. When you sign up for Inform, do people get news just for their area, or is it more global world news that are issues that are happening, political issues? Is it something more out of politics? How does the content works?
Totally. Our flagship product is what we call our Global Citizen or Global Citizen Priorities. And it takes a coverage view of the entire world based on what is the most impactful news, like what is changing the human condition and shaping the world in the largest ways. And so that's our general lens of what we curate and what we bring to our readers. And that is our flagship product, is the kind of most impactful things of the day, of the last 24 hours. We have other versions of Informed. We have different topics, informed healthcare, informed materials, informed real estate, informed manufacturing, informed law, legal. Those are not yet being pushed into the market, not being released. They are still in private beta formats, and we're still developing them. And we are very much focused on the global citizen kind of view. That's the one that that's our flagship product and our very first public product. And so we're continuing to grow that before increasing to informed AI topic, informed healthcare topic, informed legal topic, etc. So we're taking it step by step, and we're doubling down on our global citizen flagship product right now.
All right, that sounds really good. And then now let's get a little more into like the purpose of Inform. So there is a problem. There is an actual problem out there, and it's information overload. We are thrown many news, as you said, something with more than 2 paragraphs. It's somewhat not only trying to push like some view into someone, but at the same time, regularly, people don't have the attention span to read that much these days. And when you look at the news, people most times don't even stand there for 2 hours. They get a partisan view and they walk away, and now they have that view because it's what they heard. And in an era where a lot of people are just moving away from, the left, right, and trying to be their own, a lot of this influenced people. So we talked about the problem, information overload, mis and disinformation out there. Now, Inform does solve that problem. How does Inform solve the problem?
You would say the problem of information overload?
Yes, the problem of information overload, and just the information that is out there. We talked a little, and we touched on this already, but keeping it unbiased, but how does it solve the problem of information overload itself?
Totally. I love that question because, as you kind of put it, we're really out here to solve two problems, and they're very related to each other. One is information overload, and one is misinformation, which is how I would generally categorize bias, right? Is sometimes if you want bias in your reading, you can get it, but it is a little bit unacceptable. I think it's very unacceptable to have news with bias presented as news. They should be presented as news commentary. And so we kind of solved two of those problems. We touched on misinformation, which is how we categorize biased news before. The way we solve information overload is also very consistent with kind of our format and what we focus on. We serve readers that are tired of traditional news. They're not looking to read more, they're looking to read less, but they're looking to know more in the process. So they're looking to be highly efficient in the way that they consume information and in the way that they consume news. And so, I would say there's maybe two different aspects, or maybe even three. One is in our concision. We write in such a concise way. We have a particular informed style book that informs how we write and communicate ideas. It is highly minimalist. So it is meant to fit into one SMS. And we never text more than once a day. That is our kind of policy, because we want to avoid the overwhelming experience or the information overload experience of being barraged with real-time updates, which most of the time are inaccurate, because when an issue is real-time, nobody has all the information about it yet. So we don't do real-time breaking news updates. We don't really focus on texting you more than once a day. We're very, very stringent on we only text once a day in the morning so that it's digestible, so that it's easy, and it takes you 30 seconds to read it. So there's a certain discipline. We never text on the weekends. We're always offline on the weekends, and we only text once a day. So we're forcefully limiting the amount that you can interact with our product and interact with our platform, so that it is healthy and balanced, and we're not promoting an information overload behavior. The other element is, because we touch on such a global scope of important things that matter to an American, because we definitely do it from a perspective of an American, not to suggest a bias, but to suggest as the things that affect an American person, a North American person, more than the people that affect people in Zimbabwe or people in Croatia. We have that sort of lens that is global coverage of things that impact the everyday American or North American. And so in that scope of kind of having a broad coverage, people, and we see this across our users, universally almost, they cancel other subscriptions. They cancel other sources of information that have been more overwhelming, that have been more demanding in their life. And they're able to read less, but know more. And we do so essentially by very concise writing, always limiting to how many times we communicate with you, limiting that to a minimum, to kind of less instead of more. And the coverage that we give allows people to resign or step away from other toxic news sources that demand constant engagement and attention, and say, what, actually, I don't need all that stuff. I don't need Washington Post. I don't need the New York Times. I don't need Bloomberg and all these sources, because I now have a shorter but a much more focused news diet.
Yeah, and you share the subscription process, and that was one of the parts that I was at the beginning. I was very curious when we connected. I was very excited to see this, because it's something that I have never seen before. I have never seen. It's just news pretty much delivered to me. There's no spam, as you said. The one part that I love is that you guys keep it to once a day. That to me is so crucial with the world where you subscribe to one of these news platforms, and there's 20 email marketings before I get an actual email like, hey, this is what I need. And what I noticed with Inform is that there's no marketing. There is, no emails like marketing, go check this article or go check what we did today. No, there's no emails at all, because it's just, as you said, an SMS service. And those SMS keeps it once a day. For example, I have mine to be set at 8 a.m., which is the time that I'm getting ready to go to work. and on my commute to work, I can either read through those or like on my free time go over it. And it's very helpful to have something like that. And it brings, as I said, it solves that problem. So I wanted to go into the platform itself a little more, and how can you explain for our listeners, how does it work? Once you are getting ready to subscribe and go in, what is the process to make it work, and what does it need from a person?
Yeah. The process of essentially joining us is extremely minimalist in the way that, we also are on a very minimalist platform, which is in every sense, as you mentioned, a reaction to how spammy and how overwhelming the status quo news media is. It's so difficult to kind of even cancel all those things. Like, hey, well, I want to receive news, but I don't want to receive all the spam. I don't want to receive the advertisements. I don't want to have the surveys. I don't want any of that stuff. I wanted to just get what I'm paid for and what I'm looking for. And so through our platform, we actually just simply did that. We, took away any of the advertisement, any of the spam, any of the surveys, any of this, annoying noise that people, when they sign up for a news service or any sort of media or an information service, that's not what they're signing up for, ever. And these news media companies have been allowed to get away with this for way too long, and we're making that difference. So to join Informed is actually super, super simple. And we pride ourselves on being as easy to join as we are to leave. You don't have to remember some sort of accounts and passwords. You just don't. You don't have to worry about privacy violating website cookies that are constantly tracking how you're engaging with things, collecting your personal information, matching things together. With us, we only know things about you that you tell us. So if you tell us nothing, we know nothing about you. And that is completely acceptable because we don't need to. We are so privacy respecting and so privacy caring that we have a very minimalist channel between us, the SMS channel, where we can't track very much. Unless you tell us something, we won't know anything. And a lot of our users actually are completely anonymous. We don't know who they are, and we don't care who they are, because that's not our point. We are not looking to target them. We're not looking to sell their information anyway. That's just not what we do. So the format, as you were suggesting, is SMS. And the way people join is extremely simple. They actually just text our number, and we run a big toll-free branded number in the United States, which is 844-406-INFO, which is 844-406-4636. And so when you text that number, and users can just text the word join, everything goes from there. We communicate with you entirely through SMS. Parts of it are automated with our AI, and parts of it are manual, because we have a level of human supervision that we take very seriously, because we are not just all AI. We take responsibility for the content 100%, and we do so by keeping the human element and the human touch in the loop, so that we're able to have the best of both worlds, AI and human supervision. And so you text a number, and we just text join to 844-406-4636, and you'd be looped into our platform. And from there, the whole communication is streamlined through SMS. You don't need to provide us your email. You don't need to provide us your name. You don't need to really provide us much if you don't want to. And you just start the subscription. Now, if you feel at some point that you're not enjoying this, you're not getting the value because maybe you don't care as much about news, or you're tired of news altogether, it's very simple. You just text us and stop. And that's it. You don't need to remember some sort of passwords. You don't need to log in. You don't need to press anything. You can just literally text us stop. And it's that simple and that easy for you to join and leave.
So, and once the person joins, I'm assuming the first thing they will receive news right away the next day. If they set their time, and you're able to choose what time you want your news to come to you, right?
Totally. So once you text join, and you're asked to start a free trial. Everybody always goes through a free trial, because we want to make sure there's a strong mutual fit, that you're actually getting value out of the service. We're not interested in having folks that are, not being served by us. If we are failing to deliver value, then we don't want to take up more of your time. And so everybody starts with a free trial that's 7 days long. It's an entire week. And it's usually more than enough time for a person to understand, hey, is this valuable for me? Is this saving me time and money and my attention? Or is actually, maybe I don't care enough. Maybe this is not important enough for me to be updated with the world in this way. So as this trial starts, you're starting to get the full version of the product right away. So you're seeing exactly how we do it, what we do. And then as the trial comes to an end, if you're enjoying it, then of course you become a paid subscriber. We only do paid subscribers because we don't have any advertisers, no investors, no sponsors. We're fully user supported. And if you don't want us to exist, we shouldn't exist. And we believe that very strongly. So as the trial comes to an end, you start a regular subscription, which is monthly, and it's $8.99 a month. And it continues without any annual contracts, any sort of long-term commitments until you text stop, in which case you're automatically unsubscribed, your payments stop, and you never have to worry about any sort of data that you have to delete or any sort of payments that you've forgotten. Once you text stop, everything is automatic and you are taken care of. So we make it very, very seamless. You also mentioned that you can use the fact that it is a conversation over text to text us back. And you can set the time preference, for example, like, hey, I'd like to receive my news at 5 a.m. because I wake up early. Or I'd like to wake up, I want to get my news late, maybe 9 a.m. That's completely fine. You just text and you say, hey, based in Chicago, 6 a.m. Super easy. Or based in New York, 9 a.m. And we're obviously able to take that into account right away and adjust your timing to your preferred preference. Now, it's also possible to text back with our team directly, because the back-to-back communication, the one-on-one communication is fully enabled for you and is meant to be useful for you. And so if you have a question of any sort, whether you missed something, you didn't understand something, you have a follow-up, you can literally just text back. And in that case, you're always talking to a human. We don't subject you to an AI conversation. I don't think a lot of folks are interested in talking to AI. So you're always talking to a human right away. And that's very important to us, is to combine the best of both worlds, the software, AI, and technology that we have and that we have built for having such a strong coverage of news, but also have the human touch of being able to take full responsibility for the output. So we're not just saying use at your own risk. No, every time you get a message, every text you're informed, every character in every word in that message is accounted for. It means we take full accountability for its accuracy, and we make sure that it is something that we can stand behind with the reputation of our entire company. And also the other side of the human experience is that if you ever want to talk to us, you're always talking to a human and never to a robot.
And that is great, in an era where robots kind of in quote unquote has taken over a little bit, where we've seen most websites these days just have an AI interactive that doesn't really have a human, a human helper. Most places, banks, and real life areas are just being taken over. So having that human interaction is always really nice to and especially with news services. I used to not long ago, and not to go directly into it, but I used to be a subscriber of the Washington Post because I was a college student for the longest. And I remember one day I had a problem with the subscription, and it was just a robot. I couldn't get behind a person. And I think being able to have that minimalistic, hey, I'm going to send a text and I'm going to get a reply back, is really helpful and supportive to people out there, that it's impressive. And I want to say in this era, it's definitely something to say that, something to say, wow, it's impressive that you have that work, because many places have decided to leave that human interaction to a computer, which is not much value anymore. It doesn't really offer a solution unless you detailed everything 100% to where a human can just couple messages, coupled talk, they can understand it more. And I think that That is huge. So, I want to say thank you for creating this platform, because it really helps and really shows us there's more to news out there. And I think, with Inform, one thing that I noticed and I've been working through is like, it gives you the news article, but it also gives you a link to them. And I really like that, because if I want to, as you said earlier, to understand and learn more, you can go to it. And if you don't mind, you might explain, like, how do you guys come across those news articles? So, like, what's the research that goes behind finding that article itself?
Totally. And so a lot of that research is assisted through our technology, the software that we have that allows us to read more news than we could read if we were just humans. And allows us to read, tens of thousands of articles per hour, per day, easily, to go through what is significant, what are the signals, what are people talking about, and what is, most importantly, the common fact base across all of these topics. And so when we encounter an issue or a topic, we don't, for example, just read a single article on it. We read virtually all the credible articles about it out there in the media. And it doesn't mean we read, unreliable articles. We don't look at folks that are just reposting and folks that are clearly biased. We have a pretty high bar for who we listen to. But in that set of credible journalists and reporters, we focus on identifying the common fact base across all of these sources. And in the end, whether we've read tens or hundreds of articles on the same issue, we find our favorite one. And our favorite one is always free to you, to the end user. We want to make sure that you don't need to create an account and you don't need to pay. And it is the most informative, while also being clear and unbiased. So it's the best that we could find out there. And that usually cycles. We have about 10 to 20 different sources that we would say are our top sources, because we are regularly citing them and we think they do really good work. And those tend to be sources that have their own reporting capabilities. So not just journalists who write about editorials and write about kind of like the way the world should be, but reporters who are on the ground, on Wall Street, talking to traders, or on the ground in Iran, talking to civilians, on the ground in Gaza, talking to folks lining up for the shelter and for resources, on the ground in Afghanistan, talking to the women being oppressed by the Taliban. And so it's very helpful to listen to them. And those are the voices that we try to amplify, is the voices of the reporters who are soliciting and getting evidence and facts behind any sort of issue. And so as we go through that pool of knowledge on every single topic, we identify our favorite source, which is the one that we ultimately wind up surfacing to the reader as a deep dive. There is another element that we do that is very unique that nobody really does. No incumbent, news company and no other challenger that we are aware of, is we have a huge obsession with primary sources. And you may have noticed that over the last couple of weeks as a reader, is we don't just always link to another journalist talking about something, which is helpful, but that's just more commentary in the end of the day, even though we've tried to reduce the commentary, get the most facts from the sources that we cite. But the best you can get is actually going directly to the horse's mouth, directly to the source that is originating this issue. And so we would cite, if it's economic or statistical, we would cite the Census Bureau, Bureau of Labor Statistics, right? The Federal Reserve. If there's economic, financial updates that we would care about, if there are companies that are being merged or companies that are doing large actions, we would cite the actual announcements from those companies instead of somebody talking about those announcements. And of course, if the White House is doing something, we'll actually just cite the White House has said this exact thing instead of citing somebody else talking about the White House with a lot of commentary that is almost unavoidable when you're talking about political issues. And so we do the same thing with researchers. If there is a research that's being shared and published, we wouldn't just share an article talking about it from some news, we would share the original research. And that level of primary source superiority and preference, primary source priority, so to speak, is very core to what we do. And we provide a summary that is so sufficient that you don't need to get more commentary. But if you want to dive deep, we'll take you straight to the Supreme Court case. We'll take you straight to the Congress bill that was just passed. And there were a lot of primary sources, for example, in yesterday's or this morning's text, I feel like more than half. And that is the power that we bring, is apart from the summary and the insight that we offer, we also will treat you like an adult, not as someone who needs to be kind of explained and digested and in the process influenced. We'll show you, if you want to know about this issue, here is the Supreme Court opinion. Here is the Congress bill that just got passed. Here is the research from Census Bureau. Here's the research from ICE arrests. And there you go. And nobody in the news industry does that. People hide and obfuscate their primary sources so that they wind up being the authority, so to speak, on the topic. But most of the time, they're insufficient, and they can't ever be sufficient to beat the level of credibility of looking through the primary source yourself. And so I would say anywhere from a quarter to a third of our sources cited are primary sources, and that is only going up.
And that is amazing because, again, the primary source, that's great because you're getting the right information from the right person, the right source needed, not, filtered through the partisan bias as we spoke before, which is, and for the listeners out there, which is one of my personal opinions why Inform it's so actually good. And I want to, clarify it because it's when I say things like that, it does sound a little bit like I am doing an ad. And I promise you that I'm in no way, shape, or form being paid by Kira or Inform. I'm talking from personal experience. I was able to use the platform at my own risk and look at it and actually have the opportunity to be a member. And I have seen how great it is. And it takes a little bit because we do have another podcast that we host on a weekly basis. And it's called Not News, where we actually also talk out of a current event in the world. And that Inform has helped with the information that we have on that podcast too at times, because we look at the articles and it's like, oh, this is happening this week. Maybe we should bring this topic and be able to do a roundtable on it. And that is helpful to have instead of going, hours of research online for bias articles. So, for those listening at home, if you're looking for that unbiased news source and, without all the noise and all this ads and cookies and emails every day, Inform is the one for you to actually subscribe to. And I wanted to enclose here with Kira. I wanted to ask you, if someone wants to learn more or find more on Inform, how can they actually do that?
Totally. I mean, the fastest, most direct way is to just text our number and see it for yourself. And I mentioned you text join to 844-406-4636. If you want to learn more from our website is informed.now. And there it will also give you a bit more guidance. But ultimately, the best way is to find out for yourself. And as I mentioned, it's easy to join and it's easy to leave.
Well, I want to thank you, so much for joining me today, and for this amazing, this amazing platform, the work you're doing. It is so important to our current society and the way we learn and take, and intake news sources. And I wanted to ask, before we finish, do you have anything else you want to add or share with the listeners today?
I think I would encourage folks to think about how their attention is being hijacked in the current media landscape. And just pay attention. Is where are the areas in your life where your attention is being hijacked and held hostage? And are you okay with that? Are you okay with being solicited every step of the way when you're trying to read news? Are you okay to see a car advertisement in the middle of the paragraph as you are reading news? Are you okay with having to read the left side, the right side to figure out where you stand every time? So you have to read double on every single news source to figure out where your opinion is. Are you okay to being forced and pushed to pick a side every time that you read an article? If you're not okay with that and you're interested in staying informed without being influenced, then would love to have you. And please, you are very welcome on board our mission of Muse without noise.
Well, I want to, again, thank you so much for joining me. And those at home, as Kira said, make sure to check it out since it's a great source. Thanks so much for listening. If you are enjoying Político, make sure to listen and follow on all podcasting platforms. If you are interested in learning more about the topic that we spoke today, follow the show notes at www.politicopod.com. Político is an Inquisitor Media original production hosted by me, Juan Collado Díaz. If you want to learn more about the work we do on our advocacy work, make sure to follow or visit Político at www.politicopod.com.